Hello, I'm going to talk about I heard a fly buzz when I died, and I've got Sasha Lawless here who's going to help me do that, so very pleased to have her here. So you start, Sasha.
Hi, we're just going to start by looking at the key ideas seen throughout the poem. As seen throughout a lot of her other poems, Emily Dickinson is questioning and being cynical about the celestial moments expected at death.
Also, Dickinson questions the ritualistic deathbed vigils that were common in her society, and she presents them to be selfish, morbid, and not comforting, as we might expect.
Whilst the pathetic appearance of the fly could be seen as humorous, another interpretation could be that Dickinson's poem has a terrifying sense that the dying person is met with darkness and the devil, and this can be symbolically represented by the fly.
Okay, so let's look at the first stanza. So you might want to refresh your memory of the first quatrain, so you might want to pause this. Okay, once you've done that, let's look at the first line. I heard a fly buzz when I died.
Dickinson undermines the expectation of an epiphanic moment expected at death by using bathos of a fly buzz. This is interesting as death is seen to be a momentous occasion, however this is reduced to something so meaningless like a fly.
Dickinson is also being quite linguistically humorous. She's using anthemeria, and that's when one part of speech, such as a noun, is turned into another part of speech, such as a verb. So here, the idea of the soul flying up to heaven, that Puritan ideal of the moment of death, your soul flying up to heaven, is pathetically or quite darkly reduced and replaced with the noun, a fly. So a celestial verb becomes a grotesque and earthly noun. Dickinson also repeats the abstract noun, the stillness. We've got that here and here. Whilst on the one hand we could interpret this as portraying the moment of death as quite gentle, I actually think that the repetition of this abstract noun creates this sense of pregnant expectation, this waiting.
The image of the storm creates a sense of anticipation and a sense of something disturbing and dark about to happen.
This mirrors the image of the maelstrom in the sky at the end of Behind Me Dips Eternity, which similarly suggests a sense of overpowering darkness that contains not peace, but something a little more overwhelming. Furthermore, the image of the storm is described as the heaves of storm. Now, a heave could be interpreted as a sigh, so the sighs of storm. Again, that is not an image of something kind of welcoming. If you sigh, there's something distressing perhaps. But also heaves, it's something heavy to lift, that this storm is something that's going to weigh down on her, it's going to maybe oppress her. And so this image of imminent death is not one that is comforting, but actually one that is quite foreboding and slightly terrifying.
It is also interesting to look at the preposition between. It shows something insignificant and small against something so overwhelming and terrifying, like death and the afterlife. This links into the same preposition between in Behind Me Dips Eternity, giving a sense of the speaker's insignificance in contrast to something overwhelming and dark about to happen.
Dickinson uses common metre in this poem. If you're not sure what common metre is, go back to your notes or use the English department's learning space to have a quick look. Common metre was the rhythm often used in hymns. It's also called hymnal metre, where it's a line of iambic tetrameter followed by a line of iambic trimeter, and then iambic tetrameter followed by iambic trimeter. Now this metre, which is often used to glory God, is being used here quite subversively to question some of her Puritan community's ideals. So it's being used in quite a cynical way. If we do a little bit more of a close analysis of one of the lines, we've got, I heard a fly buzz when I died. If we look at this, we've got two stress beats in a row. I heard a fly buzz. I think Dickinson's purposely stressing both of these words to emphasise the bathos of a fly descending at that moment of death. It highlights the onomatopoeic word buzz, which suggests death not to be something celestial, but be something irritating and mundane. And I think it emphasises the darkness of this poem as opposed to anything far more glorious. Right, so let's move on to the second stanza.
In this stanza, Dickinson uses Synecdoche, which reduces the watching people to just their eyes. This is quite unsettling, as it creates a sense of disembodied watching and uneasy voyeurism.
Certainly we get the sense that Dickinson is critical of this deathbed vigil. The onlookers are not mourning anymore. Their eyes are wrung dry. And in fact, it seems that they're more interested in seeking confirmation of redemption or some sort of confirmation of the afterlife rather than comforting the dying person. Certainly we see that Dickinson is presenting a cynical perception of the concept of deathbed vigils. It seems that the onlookers are all waiting with bated breath for the last onset. This is quite an interesting description of the coming of the Redeemer to take the soul up to heaven, the last onset. First of all, you have the juxtaposition of last and onset meaning kind of a beginning. So we could see this as the beginning of the afterlife or the beginning of the life beyond our earthly existence. However, onset also has another interpretation. It can mean an attack or an onslaught, and this is a vision of the afterlife which is a little bit unsettling. It suggests something a lot darker than the celestial moment that the Puritan faith would have expected. Dickinson is being a little bit sceptical and questioning of her community's faith here.
The word willed is significant, as the noun will is a document that distributes various belongings to people after they die. This could mirror the perception of the individual becoming less whole and fragmented, and is supported by the word portions, as there is a sense of the individual being broken and separated.
Again, this suggests a subtle criticism of the onlookers who are gaining material possessions from the will of the dying person. And there is something bleak about keepsakes which hold such personal and sentimental value being signed away with the cold legalism of the verb signed away. Furthermore, the idea that portions of her be assignable relates to the idea of the separation of body and soul, and it is the soul that flies up to meet the Redeemer at death. So she's talking about the idea of the body being separated, becoming dual, and certainly we get a sense at the end of other poems that it is just the body that is left. At the end of the last night that she lived, the mourners and those at deathbed vigil place the hair and draw the head erect. They again separate the body out into its parts using synecdoche, and a sense that all there is left is this body once the soul has gone to heaven.
Dickinson returns to the pathetic idea that in fact death is not a celestial moment, and that it is one the dying person is met with an insignificant fly.
An alternative interpretation is that this is, in fact, about a spiritual struggle of whether the speaker of this person is going to go to heaven or hell. Certainly the fly could be seen as a symbol of something hellish or devilish. Certainly we've got the symbolism of the black with the fly. But also Beelzebub was known as Lord of the Flies, and in 1863 there's a book of engravings by Colin de Clancy called Dictionnaire Infernal, which presents Beelzebub as essentially an enormous blue bottle. So here she's not only snubbing our expectations of the miraculous moment of death, but she is in fact suggesting that there may be a spiritual struggle of where this speaker is going to go, heaven or hell.
In the final stanza, the words uncertain and stumbling suggest that the moment of the afterlife is not majestic but haunting. The king they expected to witness had not arrived. Furthermore, the onomatopoeic noun buzz with the fricative Z sound creates an irritating drone, therefore furthering us from the celestial moment.
Dickinson suggests that the terror advances part by part with the repetition of and then, suggesting a high awareness of this and a high consciousness of this moment-by-moment failure of her ability to see. There is a sense of slow and terrifying experience of the oncoming darkness and the oncoming obscurity.
The windows could represent the eyes as the windows of the soul, suggesting that the fly is preventing the soul from reaching its celestial destination.
The end of the poem ends on a note of darkness, confusion, and obscurity. As is so typical for Dickinson, her poem eludes any sense of conclusion. The tautology of the last line, "I could not see to see," emphasises the totality of the darkness and the obscurity. The speaker is not enlightened at death. Certainly, the noun light has a small L. It lacks the capital letter for the light of God, perhaps suggesting the absence of God or the absence of light. Contextually, Dickinson was the only member of her family not to have declared publicly her faith in the Second Great Awakening, a religious revival which reached her hometown of Amherst. And so she definitely felt that the eyes of the community were on her, and we see those eyes in the poem's second stanza. And there would have definitely been the question over whether she, a non-declared believer, could achieve salvation.
We hope this has consolidated some of your ideas about the poem from the lesson.
And perhaps given you a few more ideas to think about.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
for
listening.